My name is Christina Horn. I'm 20 years old. At this age, people say you're supposed to be living recklessly, figuring yourself out, stumbling into mistakes. But me, I thought I had already figured out my future. His name was Rick, and for 4 years, he was the center of my life. I worked as a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm, a good job, solid pay, and a reputation for being reliable in a field full of overpromisers. But my real pride wasn't in the projects I ran. It was in Rick, the man who made even grocery runs feel like an adventure. I thought we were building something permanent. I thought his family would one day be mine. I was wrong. From the beginning, Rick's parents, Lawrence and Jacqueline, looked at me the way people study price tags, not people. Lawrence, at 58, ran a custom architectural materials company that had once been prestigious, but was now teetering on collapse. Jacqueline, 56, had a talent for judgment disguised as conversation. So Christina, she'd ask with a saccharine smile, "What exactly does a project manager do? Does it pay well enough for a family?" Always polite, always sharp enough to draw blood. 8 months ago, their disdain cracked open when Rick confided in me that Lawrence's business was dying. Bad investments, missed opportunities, debts piling high. Rick was devastated. I loved him, so his pain became mine. And in that moment, I thought maybe I could help. My father, unlike Lawrence, ran a massive property development company. They had a flagship project about to break ground, one that needed niche architectural finishing work. I made my case to him. Rick's father's company could handle it. Dad didn't hand out lifelines without scrutiny. His team investigated and returned grim reports. Lawrence's business was high-risk, poorly managed, practically a sinking ship. But Dad trusted me. He structured a deal, $1 million subcontract with strict performance checks and, crucially, a termination for convenience clause. It meant we could cancel at any time, penalty set at $75,000. "Remember this, Christina," Dad had said, his eyes steady on mine. "This is an out if you ever need it." When I delivered the news, Rick's relief was so raw, he hugged me, like I had just pulled him back from a cliff. Lawrence shook my hand with such force I thought my bones might crack. Jacqueline's smile softened for the first time, her eyes gleaming not with affection, but with opportunity. For a while, things seemed better. Lawrence started calling me daughter. Jacqueline stopped her condescending questions. Their affection was conditional, but I wanted to believe it was real. But slowly as the money flowed in, their arrogance bloomed back. Lawrence bragged about being back on top. Jacqueline began planning a wedding far more extravagant than anything Rick and I had discussed. The breaking point came one night over wine in their pristine living room. I gently raised concerns about the ballooning wedding costs, pointing out it was double what Rick and I could afford. Jacqueline's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Oh, Christina, don't be provincial. One must project success. A wedding is an investment in our family's image." I tried to keep my tone calm. "With respect, Jacqueline, it's our wedding, and we need to stay within what we can afford." Lawrence puffed, his chest, arrogance radiating. "Christina, you're a capable manager, but you lack vision. Rick belongs with someone who understands what this family is becoming again." The air went cold. I looked at Rick silently, begging him to defend me, but he just swirled his wine, avoiding my eyes. That silence screamed louder than words. Jacqueline leaned forward, her voice velvet in venom. "You're a sweet girl, Christina, but you're a stepping stone, not a destination. Rick deserves a partner who reflects his station." And then Rick finally spoke, quiet but firm. "They're right, Christina. I'm sorry. This isn't working. We should call off the wedding." It wasn't lightning that struck me. It was ice creeping through every vein. I had handed them my love, my loyalty, my family's resources, and they discarded me like a tool they no longer needed. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just set my glass down, stood up, and whispered, "I understand." I walked out, my legs trembling, and sat in my car in their driveway for 10 long minutes, hands shaking on the wheel. The drive home blurred, but one thought pierced through. They had used me. And underneath the heartbreak, a cold, focused anger began to take root. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail, the condescension in Jacqueline's laugh, Lawrence's puffed-up arrogance, Rick's silence that cut deeper than any insult. By morning, my tears had dried into something sharper. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had always stood behind me, my father. His voice was groggy when he answered, but the second he heard me say, "It's over with Rick," he was wide awake. "Christina." What happened? I swallowed hard, the words tasting like ash. They decided I wasn't good enough. They don't want me in their family anymore, not now that their business is safe. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted warmth, melting into steel. I see. That clause I told you about. The termination for convenience. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I hesitated. It wasn't revenge that I wanted, or maybe it was. Maybe I needed them to feel, even for a moment, the hollow betrayal they had left me with. Yes, I whispered. I want to end the contract. My father didn't even flinch. It will cost us some money and a few headaches, but family comes first. Always. That morning, legal drafted the notice. By noon, it was on Lawrence's desk. $1 million contract evaporated in one clean, merciless stroke. At first, my phone was silent. Then the calls began. Lawrence's number lit up my screen. I let it ring. Then Rick, then Jacqueline. Their voicemails piled up one after another. Christina, this must be a mistake. Call me back immediately. Christina, what the hell is going on? My dad says the contract's been canceled. Fix this. This can't be real. You wouldn't do this. You can't. I didn't answer. I needed the silence. But deep inside, a war raged. I had loved Rick. I had fought for his family when no one else would. And now with one phone call, I had torn down the lifeline I had helped build. I almost broke when I listened to Rick's second voicemail. His voice cracked, genuine fear threaded through it. My dad. He took out a loan based on the full contract value. He has payroll to meet. If this isn't reversed, he's ruined. Please, Christina, just call your dad. Tell him it was a mistake. My hand trembled, hovering over the call button. For a second, the part of me that still loved Rick screamed to save him. But then I remembered the way he avoided my eyes, the way he let his parents dismantle me piece by piece while he sat silent. This wasn't a mistake. This was justice. By evening, the tone of their messages shifted from confusion to desperation. Lawrence's voice carried naked panic. You don't understand, Christina. The penalty fee doesn't cover my next shipment. I'm exposed. I'll go under. That's when it clicked. He hadn't just used the contract to stabilize. He had leveraged it to the hilt, taking out new debts, as if the $1 million was already his. The $75,000 kill fee my father's company owed wouldn't even scratch the surface. Their entire empire wasn't just fragile, it was hollow. And by daring to discard me, they had handed me the very knife that could cut it all down. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I felt the shift. The balance of power had moved. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging to belong. They were. The next day, my phone became a battlefield. First came Rick, his voice ragged with panic. Christina, you don't understand. This was just a fight. My mom and dad went too far. Okay, you can't destroy people's lives over words. Please, we can fix this. Call your father. Tell him to reinstate the contract. You loved me. I know you did. Don't let this be the end. His plea twisted something deep inside me. A part of me still remembered how his laughter felt like sunlight, how his hand in mine had once felt like home. But then I remembered the cold sting of his silence when I needed him most. He hadn't fought for me. He had let them decide my worth. This wasn't just a fight, Rick, I said flatly. It was the truth. And now you're living with the consequences. He begged again, his words dissolving into angry disbelief. You'll regret this, Christina. You're heartless. Then he hung up. By evening, it wasn't Rick, but Jacqueline waiting for me. I spotted her by the entrance of my apartment building, dressed impeccably as always, though her eyes betrayed sleeplessness. As I approached, she plastered on a sorrowful smile. Christina, she said softly, stepping forward as if she were a grieving mother instead of the woman who had gutted me. We are all so sorry. You know how stress makes people say things they don't mean. Lawrence and I, we misspoke. Don't punish us all for one heated evening. Her voice dripped with manufactured sympathy, but her eyes were calculating. You meant every word, I replied, my tone like glass. She quickened her step to match mine as I headed for my car. Think of Rick, she pleaded, her voice breaking just enough to seem believable. He's devastated. He still loves you. And think of all those workers, dozens of families who will be on the street if Lawrence can't pay payroll. Do you want that on your conscience, Christina? All because your feelings got hurt. I stopped in my tracks and turned to face her. My feelings. My voice rose trembling, not with weakness, but with fury. Your family used me. Used my love, my father's company, my loyalty. And when you no longer needed me, you threw me away. That isn't about my feelings. That's about your greed. Her mask slipped just for a second. The sympathy hardened into something cold. Then at least let Rick keep the ring, she snapped. It's the least he deserves for the pain and suffering you've caused. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. The audacity of it. That ring, the sapphire piece I'd chosen because its color mirrored Rick's eyes, wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise, a symbol. Now she wanted to twist it into some sort of parting gift for discarding me. I didn't answer. I simply unlocked my car, slid inside, and closed the door in her face. Through the glass, I saw her lips curl into a bitter smile before she walked away. Driving off, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. They weren't just panicking, they were entitled. Even in ruin, they believed they had the right to take something more from me. But if Jacqueline thought the ring was hers to keep, she had just awakened a different side of me. It was no longer just about the contract, it was about justice. And justice, I decided, would not be gentle. For a week, there was silence. No calls, no visits, just an eerie quiet that made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had accepted defeat. But silence, I learned, is never peace, it's planning. It began with whispers that reached me through mutual acquaintances. Jacqueline had unleashed her weapon of choice, gossip. She painted me as unhinged, vindictive, a spoiled girl who used her father's power to crush her fiancé's family out of spite. In her story, I wasn't the woman who had lifted Lawrence's company back from the brink. I was a controlling partner who dangled contracts like a leash. And when Rick dared to stand up to me, I retaliated by destroying them. The audacity of it was breathtaking. And some people, distant friends, casual colleagues, believed it. My phone buzzed with judgmental texts. Wow, Christina, I didn't think you had that in you. Or worse, couldn't you just forgive him? Each message was a blade, but the wounds didn't go deep. Because the people who mattered, the ones who had been with me in the trenches of my life, knew the truth. My best friends shut down the rumors before they spread. My father's company, when asked by industry contacts, issued a short, sterile statement. The contract was terminated for convenience per standard contractual rights. A new vendor has been secured. No drama, no accusations, just business. And that, more than anything, made Jacqueline's twisted narrative collapse under its own weight. But while I could brush off the lies, there was something I couldn't ignore: the consequences for Lawrence's employees. I heard through whispers in the industry that the bank had indeed called in his loan. Suppliers demanded cash up front. Payroll checks bounced. One by one, the people who had believed in him were being laid off right before the holidays. That guilt clawed at me. These workers weren't the ones who had laughed at me over wine or called me a stepping stone. They were collateral damage victims of Lawrence's arrogance and Jacqueline's greed. Lying awake one night, I whispered to myself, this isn't clean revenge. This is amputation. And yet I couldn't go back. Even if I wanted to, there was nothing to fix. Lawrence had built his empire on sand. All I had done was pull away the crutch he had leaned on. Meanwhile, Rick retreated to social media, posting vague, melodramatic statuses, healing from toxicity, learning my worth. Paired with moody black and white photos, it was a performance. His followers showered him with sympathy. Some even messaged me, accusing me of being the villain in his healing journey. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself online. Let them think what they wanted. The people who mattered already knew the truth. But through it all, one thought gnawed at me, like a splinter under skin, Jacqueline's parting shot about the ring. The least we deserve. That sapphire wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything I had given and everything they thought they could keep after discarding me. I realized then if I let them keep it, they would walk away believing they had taken the last word. And I wasn't ready to let them. The sapphire ring lived in my mind like a ghost. Every time I remembered Jacqueline's smug tone, the least he deserves for the pain you caused, I felt my chest tighten. That ring wasn't theirs to keep. It was mine to give, and the condition for it had shattered the night Rick told me it was over. I decided to act. I didn't call my father's corporate attorneys. I wanted this to be mine. My fight, my choice. So I found a modest lawyer who specialized in personal disputes, calm, methodical, nothing flashy. Together we drafted a formal letter to Rick, returned the $9, $500 engagement ring, or face legal action. The response, silence. So we filed in small claims court. Meanwhile, Lawrence's world was crumbling faster than even I had imagined. His house, the grand fortress Jacqueline had always bragged about, was listed for sale. Suppliers refused to ship him materials without cash. Former employees began posting online, blaming him for mismanagement and broken promises. And yet through all that ruin, the family still clung to arrogance when it came to me. One evening, an email arrived from a new account, Rick's. It was long, rambling, dripping with bitterness. "You're dragging us through the mud over a stupid ring while my family is losing our home. Do you have any idea how heartless that is? You're soulless, Christina, completely soulless." I read it twice, once as the woman who had loved him and once as the woman he had betrayed. Then I calmly forwarded it to my lawyer with a single note: evidence. He admits they still have the ring. The case crawled forward, court date set for the following month. During those weeks, I kept seeing subtle reminders of their downfall: a realtor's sign hammered into their lawn, furniture being moved out under the cover of night, Jacqueline's once lavish social media accounts going dark. And still they refused to return what wasn't theirs. I started to see the ring less as jewelry and more as a mirror reflecting their entitlement, their belief that they could take and take without consequence. So when the court summons was served, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt steady. This wasn't revenge, it was accountability. And in a few weeks, for the first time, they wouldn't be able to twist the story or drown me in their words. For once, they would face a place where facts, not arrogance, decided the outcome. The courtroom. The courthouse wasn't glamorous. No chandeliers, no velvet chairs, just fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead and rows of hard benches. A world away from Jacqueline's ornate living room, where they had once dismissed me as a stepping stone. I walked in with my lawyer at my side, clutching a small folder of documents. Across the room, Rick sat with his parents. They looked smaller, somehow diminished. Jacqueline's immaculate hair was pulled back too tightly, her eyes shadowed. Lawrence slumped in his chair, his arrogance sagging under the weight of sleepless nights. Rick refused to meet my gaze. The case was simple: the return of the $9,500 sapphire engagement ring. When the judge called us forward, Rick represented himself. He launched into a shaky, tearful speech about how our love had been real, how I had betrayed him, how the ring was a gift, a memory, something she can't take back no matter what happened. His voice cracked at just the right moments. He even reached for Jacqueline's hand as if to prove he was the wounded party. If I hadn't lived the truth, I might have believed him. But then my lawyer spoke, calm, steady, surgical. He laid out the facts with no theatrics: date of engagement, appraised value of the ring, date. Rick ended the engagement. Copies of polite requests for the ring's return. Rick's bitter email explicitly stating they were keeping it as compensation. No drama, just evidence. The judge listened in silence, his face unreadable. When my lawyer finished, the judge turned to Rick. "Mr. Walsh," he said, voice firm, "an engagement ring is considered a conditional gift. The condition is marriage. When the engagement is terminated, especially by your own words, the ring must be returned. You will either return the ring or pay Ms. Horn the appraised value of $9,500. You have 10 business days." The gavel struck. Final. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights. Jacqueline's jaw clenched. Her face twisted into a mask of humiliation. Lawrence stared at the floor. Rick. Rick just looked stunned, as if the world had betrayed him instead of the other way around. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered my folder, thanked the judge, and walked out. A week later, my lawyer received a padded envelope. Inside was the sapphire ring, no note, no apology, just silence. I held it in my hand once more, cool and heavy, a fragment of a promise, long broken. For a moment, grief stirred in me, the memory of the love I thought I had, the future I once believed in. Then I placed the ring back in its box, shut it tight, and handed it over to my lawyer. That chapter was closed. In the weeks after the court ruling, I expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, maybe even euphoric. But the truth, what I felt, was quieter than that. The ring was no longer in their possession. Lawrence's company dissolved under the weight of debt. Their grand house, sold at a loss, replaced by a modest rental on the edge of town. The gossip that Jacqueline once weaponized had gone silent. Even Rick stopped posting his cryptic cries for sympathy. Their empire of arrogance had crumbled into dust. And yet I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no victory lap, just a calm, steady breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Rick had tried one last time to explain himself. He claimed he'd made a mistake, that he still loved me, that if I could just forgive, but I didn't respond. I had blocked his number, his emails, every door he might use to walk back into my life. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Instead, I turned inward. I started therapy, not just to process the betrayal, but to face something harder, my own willingness to ignore the red flags because I wanted the relationship to work. For 4 years, I had convinced myself that love could blind out condescension, that loyalty could soften disdain. But love isn't meant to be begged for. It isn't meant to be conditional. It took losing Rick to finally see that truth. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself. Weekends turned into hiking trips with friends, the kind of laughter that felt free instead of fragile. At work, I took on a new project, bigger, riskier, but mine to lead from start to finish. Each milestone reminded me that I was more than the girl someone dismissed as a stepping stone. And my father, our relationship deepened. He had taken a financial hit, weathered logistical chaos, all because he believed in me. That knowledge became an anchor. One night over dinner, he looked at me and said, "You fought your own battle, Christina, and you won it on your terms. I'm proud of you." Those words meant more than any court ruling ever could. Do I feel happy that Lawrence and Jacqueline lost their home, that Rick now wanders in the ruins of what his family once was? No. What I feel is something simpler justice. Because in the end, I didn't orchestrate their downfall. I just stepped aside and let the consequences of their own choices finally reach them. Their empire was never built to last. I had been the single fragile pillar holding it up. And when they cast me aside, they lost the only thing keeping them standing. Now I walk forward lighter, not because I won,